The Young and the Restless, Spoilers Fridays, full episodes, the 13th of March 2026. The heavy mahogany doors of the Abbott mansion living room snapped shut with a resounding definitive thud that echoed through the cavernous space. The air inside the newly refreshed yet traditionally imposing room was instantly suffocating, thick with an undeniable electric tension that seemed to vibrate against the floral wallpaper and the pristine family portraits. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the French doors offered no warmth. Instead, it cast long, sharp shadows across the Persian rug, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the charged atmosphere. Standing near the grand fireplace, clutching a crystal tumbler of bourbon he hadn't taken a single sip from, was Billy Abbott. Pacing near the velvet sofa like a caged predator was Kyle Abbott, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked furiously in his cheek. And standing front and center, blocking the only viable exit to the foyer, was Diane Jenkins. At the center of this hostile, inescapable triangle stood Phyllis Summers. For once in her tumultuous, unpredictable life, the fiery architect of chaos looked entirely out of her element. Her designer trench coat was clutched tightly around her waist, her posture rigid, her usually defiant shoulders drawn up toward her ears. "You're not leaving," Phyllis Diane's voice sliced through the heavy silence, cold and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "Not until we get some actual answers." "I don't have to listen to this." Phyllis deflected her voice a pitch higher than its usual sultry, confident rasp. She took a quick, evasive step to the left, but Billy immediately mirrored her movement, stepping out from the fireplace to cut off her path. "Actually, you do," Billy said, his tone dangerously calm, the kind of quiet that precedes a devastating storm. He set his glass down on the side table with a definitive clink. "Because the walls are closing in, red. We know all about the little secret arrangement you've been cooking up in the shadows with Victor Newman. You're cornered, and the time for your signature deflections is over." Diane stepped forward, closing the physical distance between herself and the woman who had been her sworn bitter enemy for decades. The history between these two women was a blood-soaked tapestry of betrayals, manipulations, and near-death encounters, but this moment transcended their petty, long-standing rivalries. "You made a deal with the devil," Diane hissed, her eyes blazing with a maternal and spousal ferocity that could not be contained. The veneer of the composed, elegant Mrs. Abbott was shattering completely, revealing the raw, desperate woman underneath. "And now my husband is missing. Jack is gone. He vanished into thin air. And the last person who had anything to do with Victor's sick, twisted machinations before this happened was you." Phyllis swallowed hard, her eyes darting toward the window, then back to Diane. "I don't know what you're talking about. Jack's business trips are his own concern. I am not his keeper, and I am certainly not Victor Newman's secretary." "Stop lying to my face," Diane screamed, the sheer volume of her voice rattling the crystal decanters on the bar cart. She jabbed a manicured finger into the space between them. "I want every single detail, Phyllis. I want to know exactly what you and Victor discussed. I want to know the terms of this unholy alliance you formed. I want to know where Jack Abbott is, and I want to know right now. What did you sell him out for this time? Was it a hotel? Was it a payout? Tell me where my husband is before I tear you apart myself." Phyllis backed up until the back of her knees hit the edge of a leather armchair. She didn't sit down. She couldn't afford to lower herself in a room full of predators. But she looked like a cornered animal. Her hands, usually so expressive and commanding, were visibly trembling, her fingers white-knuckling the fabric of her coat. The confident, snarky woman who strutted through the halls of Jabot Cosmetics or the Grand Phoenix with a smirk and a master plan was entirely absent. This was a woman who was genuinely, deeply terrified. "You don't understand," Phyllis stammered, her hands coming up defensively, palms facing outward as if to physically ward off Diane's rage. "You think this is just some standard Victor Newman corporate game. You think this is about stock prices or Chancellor Industries or some petty revenge plot over a boardroom seat. It's not." "Then what is it about?" Kyle demanded, stepping up beside his mother, his imposing frame casting a shadow over Phyllis. "It's bigger. It's so much more dangerous than any of you can comprehend," Phyllis whispered, her voice cracking, her breathing shallow and erratic. Victor isn't just playing chess anymore. He's burning the whole board down to ashes." She looked around the room, her eyes wide and paranoid, almost as if she expected the very walls of the Abbott mansion to be wired with Newman security cameras. "If I say what I know, the consequences. You have no idea the kind of trap he's set. It's a nightmare, Diane. A living nightmare." Billy narrowed his eyes, studying his former wife with a clinical, cynical precision. He had loved Phyllis, hated her, fought with her, married her, and conspired with her. He knew every single one of her tells. He knew the way she played with the rings on her fingers when she was bluffing, the way she deflected with fiery anger when she was guilty, and the way she used tears as a weapon. But this sheer, unadulterated panic, the pale skin, the rapid pulse visible at the base of her throat, that was rare. Yet Billy wasn't buying that she was entirely a helpless victim in this scenario. She was Phyllis Summers. She always had an angle. "You're holding out on us," Red Billy said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying the heavy weight of a hardened cynic who had been burned by her too many times. "You're giving us just enough to scare us, just enough to make us hesitate, but you're deliberately hiding the core of it. You're putting up a smokescreen. Why? What's your play this time? Are you trying to leverage Jack's disappearance to save your own skin?" "There is no play," Billy Phyllis pleaded, turning her desperate gaze to him. "For God's sake, why can't you just trust me for once in your miserable life? I am trying to prevent a catastrophe." "Trust you?" Billy let out a harsh, humorless laugh that echoed bitterly in the large room. "You made a secret pact with the man who has spent the last 40 years trying to systematically destroy this family. You climbed into bed with the scorpion, and now you expect me to believe you're suddenly the tragic protector of the Abbott legacy. Cut the crap, Phyllis. Drop the act. Tell us the truth. What did you give Victor, and what exactly did he do with my brother?" "Enough," Kyle shouted, his voice cracking with raw, unfiltered emotion. He pushed past Billy, stepping directly into Phyllis's personal space, his face inches from hers. The polished, confident co-CEO of Jabot Cosmetics was completely gone, replaced by a terrified, desperate son who felt his world crumbling beneath his feet. "Phyllis, look at me," Kyle begged, his bright blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears, his chest heaving with the effort to maintain his composure. "This is my dad. This is the man who raised me. This is Harrison's grandfather. He is Summer's grandfather. We are family, whether we like it or not. You cannot stand there in our home and play your twisted little riddles while my father is out there, God knows where." "God knows in what condition." Kyle's hands gripped the back of the leather armchair, his knuckles turning stark white from the pressure. "I am sick of the games. I am sick of the endless secrets and the corporate espionage and the vendettas. If you know where he is, you have to tell me. Stop beating around the bush. Stop speaking in code. Every single second you waste protecting Victor Newman or protecting yourself is a second my father could be suffering. How can you look Summer in the eye if you let something happen to Jack?" Phyllis closed her eyes tight, a single betraying tear escaping her lashes and tracking slowly down her pale cheek. When she opened them again, the terror was still profoundly present in her gaze, but it was now hardened by a grim, unbreakable resolve. "You think I'm protecting Victor?" she asked, her voice dropping to a haunting, hollow whisper that sent a chill down Billy's spine. "I'm not protecting that monster. I'm protecting Jack. And I'm protecting myself." Diane scoffed loudly, a sound of pure disgust. "Oh, how noble of you, Phyllis. Always the martyr." Phyllis shot Diane a venomous, piercing glare that instantly silenced the older woman's sarcasm. "Listen to me, all of you," Phyllis commanded, her words measured, heavy, and dripping with dread. "This isn't a kidnapping for a cash ransom. This isn't a leverage play for a piece of chancellor or a seat on the Jabot board. The information I have, the intricate details of what Victor has set in motion, if I speak them aloud to you right now, I trigger a contingency that Victor has put in place. A contingency that will threaten Jack's safety in ways you cannot even begin to imagine." She took a deep, shuddering breath, looking from Kyle's devastated face to Billy's hardened skepticism to Diane's simmering rage. "If I tell you where he is or what the end game is, it will be the end of Jack. Victor made that explicitly, terrifyingly clear. And it will be the end of me too. My life is on the line just as much as his." "That's insane," Billy muttered, shaking his head. "Victor is ruthless, but he doesn't just execute people. He's a businessman. He is a megalomaniac who has lost his grip on his own humanity." Phyllis fired back, her voice rising in hysteria. "You haven't seen the look in his eyes, Billy. You haven't heard the coldness in his voice when he talks about completely erasing Jack from existence. Victor's plan is a labyrinth. It is complex, it is multi-layered, and it is rigged with psychological and physical explosives at every single turn. You think you can just march over to the Newman Ranch, demand answers from the great Victor Newman, and bring Jack home in time for dinner. If you do that, you will get him killed. The risks here are astronomical. They are beyond anything we have ever dealt with. You are all walking blind into a minefield, and you're begging me to hand you the detonator. I won't do it. Silence fell over the room, heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The antique grandfather clock in the hallway ticked a rhythmic, mocking reminder of the precious time that was slipping away while Jack remained missing. So that's it, Diane finally asked, her voice trembling. The fiery rage that had fueled her only moments ago had been entirely stripped away, leaving nothing but a hollow, agonizing despair. You're just going to stand there in my home, look me in the eye, and say nothing. You're going to let my husband rot in whatever hell Victor has put him in? I've said all I can say, Phyllis replied, her jaw setting in that familiar, immovably stubborn line. She crossed her arms tightly over her chest, fortifying her emotional and physical walls. She was terrified, yes, but she was also resolute. She remained absolutely steadfast. She would not reveal the whole truth. Not today. Not to them. The risk was too monumental, the penalty for betrayal too absolute. The tension in the room skyrocketed, transforming from the hot, explosive anger of an interrogation into a cold, paralyzing dread that settled deep into the bones of everyone present. The air grew so thick it was hard to breathe. Billy looked at Kyle, who was staring blankly at the floor, his chest heaving. Kyle then looked at his mother, whose face had gone completely ashen. In that prolonged, agonizing silence, a collective realization washed over the three Abbotts like a tidal wave of ice water. Phyllis wasn't the mastermind here. She wasn't the grinning villain pulling a fast one on the Abbott family for her own amusement. She was just another pawn trapped on a board that was entirely controlled by a man who played by no rules. Victor Newman was pulling the strings, manipulating the entire situation from his leather chair at Newman Enterprises, using Phyllis's fear to keep the Abbotts paralyzed. But why? The questions began to swirl in the silent room, deafening in their implications. What was Victor's true motive? If this wasn't about Chancellor Industries, if this wasn't about the usual predictable corporate warfare that had defined their family's feud for decades, then what was the end game? Why go to such extreme, dangerous, life-threatening lengths to eliminate Jack Abbott from the board now? What had Jack uncovered, or what had Victor lost, that pushed the patriarch of the Newman family over the edge into pure, unadulterated villainy? Billy gripped his glass again, his knuckles white. Diane sank slowly onto the edge of the velvet sofa, her hands covering her face. Kyle stared out the French doors, looking out over the manicured lawns of the estate, realizing that all the money and power in Genoa City couldn't protect them from the storm that was coming. The group stood in the darkening shadows of the Abbott mansion, the horrifying truth settling into their souls. Victor Newman had declared a new, unprecedented kind of war. He was operating in the shadows, moving his pieces with a lethal precision and leaving them completely in the dark. And as they looked at Phyllis, silent, terrified, and resolute, they realized with a sickening certainty that they were already losing. The mahogany walls of the Newman Enterprises CEO office seemed to absorb the tension, but they could not mask the palpable hostility radiating from the room's two occupants. Victor Newman sat behind his imposing desk, his hands steepled, his dark eyes locked onto the fiery redhead pacing before him. Phyllis Summers was not a woman who intimidated easily, and she wore her defiance like a shield. You're asking for the moon, Victor, and you expect Chancellor Winters to just hand it over on a silver platter. Phyllis snapped her heels, clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. This deal was supposed to be a synergy, a partnership. But looking at these revised clauses, you're not looking for a merger. You're looking for an execution. Victor did not flinch. His voice, a low, gravelly rumble, filled the silence. I am looking out for the future of Newman Enterprises, Phyllis. Chancellor Winters is in a precarious position. I am offering them a lifeline. If they choose to view it as a noose, that is their prerogative, but the terms are non-negotiable. Phyllis stopped leaning over his desk, her eyes flashing. You want to absorb their streaming divisions, gut their management, and leave Lily Winters as a figurehead. It's corporate cannibalism. It is business, Victor corrected smoothly. Something you used to understand before you let your emotions dictate your strategies. Before Phyllis could fire back a venomous retort, the private line on Victor's desk illuminated. He held up a single authoritative finger, silencing her, and pressed the speaker button. Yes. Mr. Newman, the voice of his head of security, crackled through the speaker. We've intercepted the data packets as you requested. You were right. Someone is actively undermining the Chancellor Winters acquisition from the inside. They've been funneling the proprietary valuation models to a shell corporation. Victor's jaw tightened. Do we have a name? We traced the digital footprint, sir. It's Billy Abbott. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the office. Phyllis straightened up her bravado momentarily, replaced by genuine shock. Billy sabotaging the deal, she knew Billy was reckless, but going head-to-head with Victor Newman in the shadows was tantamount to corporate suicide. Victor ended the call, the click echoing like a gunshot. A cold, terrifying smile touched the corners of his mouth. Billy Boy Abbott, he murmured, the name tasting like ash. He thinks he can play games with my company. He thinks he can turn the tables and secure the Abbott family's dominance by destroying this deal. Victor, Phyllis started, her voice uncharacteristically cautious. Billy is a wild card, but if he's doing this, he's doing it to protect Jabot's flank. He knows if you swallow Chancellor Winters, the Abbotts are next on your chessboard. He is a fool, Victor stated, standing up, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the room. And he is about to learn the most painful lesson of his miserable life. Victor walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the Genoa city skyline. If Billy wants to operate in the gutter, I will meet him there. But I will not target his bank accounts, Phyllis. I will target his heart. Phyllis frowned, a creeping sense of dread pooling in her stomach. What are you talking about? Victor turned to face her, his expression utterly devoid of mercy. I have men watching Lily Winters, and I have eyes on Johnny and Katie. If Billy Abbott does not cease his pathetic attempts at sabotage and surrender his shares immediately, his children and his precious Lily will find themselves in a very precarious situation. Phyllis physically recoiled, her breath hitching. Victor, no, you cannot be serious. Johnny and Katie are Victoria's children. They are your grandchildren, for God's sake. They are Abbott's, Victor growled, slamming a fist onto the desk. And they are being raised by a man who has consistently proven himself to be a liability to my family. I am simply ensuring that Billy understands the stakes. I will not have my empire threatened by a degenerate gambler. This isn't business anymore, Victor. This is madness, Phyllis yelled, her anger boiling over. You're threatening the safety of innocent children of Lily. You're crossing a line that you can't uncross. I draw the lines, Phyllis Victor roared back, his eyes blazing with a terrifying intensity, and I will do whatever is necessary to protect my legacy. You would do well to remember that. Phyllis stared at the man she had known, fought, and sometimes allied with for decades. She had seen Victor be ruthless, manipulative, and cold, but this was a level of darkness that shook her to her core. She realized with a sickening clarity that Victor was not bluffing. The threat was real, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Across town, in the sleek modern offices of Chancellor Winters, Billy Abbott was riding a dangerous high. He sat back in his chair, staring at the lines of code on his encrypted laptop. He had done it. He had successfully embedded a poison pill into the valuation metrics that Newman Enterprises was relying on. When Victor tried to close the deal, the financial discrepancies would trigger an SEC investigation, stalling the acquisition indefinitely and giving the Abbotts the leverage they needed to swoop in. He took a sip of his coffee, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. For once, he was 10 steps ahead of the great Victor Newman. His phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. Billy opened it casually, expecting a confirmation from his tech contact. Instead, his blood ran cold. It was a photograph. Lily was sitting at an outdoor cafe laughing at something off camera. In the foreground, slightly out of focus but unmistakable, was a man in a dark suit, his hand resting inside his jacket. Billy's heart hammered against his ribs. He swiped to the next photo. It was Johnny and Katie. They were walking out of their elite private school, their backpacks slung over their shoulders. Parked directly across the street was a black SUV with tinted windows. The license plate was clearly visible, and Billy knew it belonged to Victor's private security fleet. A final message followed the photos times. You have 24 hours to undo your mess, Billy boy, or the people you love will pay the price for your arrogance. Do not test me. VN asterisk. The phone slipped from Billy's trembling fingers, clattering onto the desk. The air in the room suddenly felt too thin to breathe. Panic, raw and suffocating, clawed at his throat. The memory of his daughter Delia's tragic death flashed behind his eyes, the screech of tires, the shattered glass, the agonizing realization that he had failed to protect his child. No, Billy choked out, burying his face in his hands. No, no, no. Victor had found his Achilles heel. He wasn't attacking Billy's pride, his money, or his career. He was threatening the very lives of the people Billy cherished most. The realization that Victor was willing to weaponize his own grandchildren to win a corporate war was a sickening blow. Billy had tried to play God in the boardroom, and now the devil was at his door. The atmosphere in the Abbott mansion was usually one of refined elegance, but tonight it felt like a war room. Jack Abbott paced the length of the Persian rug in the living room, his face flushed with a mixture of disbelief and incandescent rage. He threatened the children. Jack's voice trembled with fury as he turned to look at his younger brother. Victor actually threatened the physical safety of Johnny and Katie, his own flesh and blood. Billy sat slumped on the sofa, a glass of untouched scotch resting on his knee. He looked utterly broken, the bravado of the morning entirely stripped away. He didn't explicitly say he'd hurt them, Jack. But you know Victor. He implied it. He showed me he has access to them. To Lily. He's telling me that if I don't back down, he will take them away, or worse. He'll use his power to make sure they aren't safe. Tracy Abbott, sitting in the armchair by the fireplace, had tears streaming down her face. She clutched a lace handkerchief, her knuckles white. Jack, we have to go to the police. We have to call Paul or Chance. We can't let him get away with this terrorism. And say what, Tracy? Billy interjected, his voice hollow. That Victor Newman has cars parked on public streets, that he sent me an intimidating text from an untraceable burner phone. The police can't do anything until a crime is committed, and by then it will be too late. Then we fight back, Jack declared, slamming his hand against the mantelpiece. We use Jabot's resources. We hire our own security. We expose him to the press. We will not let Victor dictate the terms of our family's existence. No, Billy stood up abruptly, the scotch sloshing over the rim of his glass. No, Jack, you don't understand. This isn't about Jabot anymore. This isn't about the Chancellor Winters deal. This is about my kids. It's about Lily. Billy, we cannot cave to a tyrant. Jack argued, though the pain in his eyes betrayed his own conflict. If you give him this deal, if you let him crush Chancellor Winters, he wins. He learns that he can use our family as hostages whenever he wants. I don't care about the damn company, Billy shouted, his voice cracking. I care about keeping my family alive. I already lost one child, Jack. I will not lose another. I will not let Lily be collateral damage in our endless war with that monster. The room fell silent, the weight of Billy's trauma hanging heavy in the air. Jack closed his eyes, the fight draining out of him. He knew the agony Billy carried over. Delia, he knew that forcing Billy to gamble with his remaining children's safety was an impossible ask. So what do we do? Jack asked softly. I have to get them out of here, Billy said, his jaw setting with a desperate resolve. I have to hide them. Until I can figure out how to dismantle Victor's leverage, they can't be in Genoa City. The night was pitch black, a heavy rain masking the sound of the tires as Billy drove the nondescript rental car down a winding, forgotten dirt road hours outside of Genoa City. In the passenger seat, Lily Winters sat rigidly, her eyes scanning the dark woods bordering the road. In the back, Johnny and Katie were asleep, exhausted by the sudden frantic packing and the tension radiating from the adults. Billy had pulled every string he had, utilizing a contact from his darker gambling days to secure an off-the-grid safe house, an old reinforced cabin that didn't exist on any public registry. Billy, Lily whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and anger. You need to tell me exactly what is going on. You pulled us out of our beds, told me we were in danger, and now we're hiding in the woods like fugitives. What did you do? Billy kept his eyes glued to the slick road. I tried to stop Victor from taking over Chancellor Winters. I found a back door in the financial models, and I exploited it. I thought I was being smart. I thought I was protecting you. And Victor found out. Lily deduced the pieces falling into place. She let out a shaky breath, and he threatened us. He sent me pictures, Lily, of you, of the kids. His men were right there. He told me to back down, or else. Billy's grip on the steering wheel was so tight his knuckles were white. I am so sorry, Lily. I never meant to put you in the crosshairs. I was just trying to win. Lily reached out, placing a trembling hand on his arm. She was furious at his recklessness, but the sheer terror in Billy's eyes tempered her anger. We're going to be okay, Billy. But you can't fight him like this. You can't play his game. He has no rules. I know, Billy whispered, the guilt gnawing at his insides like acid. I'm going to fix this. I promise you, I will fix this. You just stay here with the kids. Don't use your phones. Don't contact anyone. I've hired private security to perimeter the woods. You'll be safe here. They pulled up to the darkened cabin. As Billy carried a sleeping Katie inside and guided Johnny to a makeshift bed, the crushing weight of his failure settled over him. He looked at the three people he loved most in the world, huddled in a cold, unfamiliar room because of his hubris. The anxiety was a physical pain in his chest. He was leaving them here isolated and vulnerable while he went back into the lion's den. Before he left, he pulled Lily into a desperate embrace. I love you, he murmured against her hair. Just come back to us, she replied, her voice breaking. And Billy, don't do anything stupid. The Genoa City Athletic Club was practically deserted at this late hour, save for the bartender polishing glasses and a solitary figure sitting in the dimly lit corner booth. Victor Newman nursed a glass of tequila, his posture relaxed, exuding the quiet, lethal confidence of an apex predator waiting for its prey. The heavy wooden doors swung open and Billy Abbott stormed in, dripping wet from the rain, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He marched straight to Victor's table and slammed his hands down on the polished mahogany. They're gone, Billy hissed, his voice vibrating with barely contained rage. You won't find them. You won't touch them. Victor did not even blink. He took a slow sip of his drink, his dark eyes studying Billy's frantic demeanor. You think you can hide them from me, Billy boy. I have resources that you cannot even begin to fathom. If I want to find them, I will. If you ever come near Lily or my children again, I swear to God, Victor, I will kill you, Billy threatened, the words tearing from his throat. Victor chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that chilled Billy to the bone. Empty threats from a desperate man. You brought this upon yourself. You thought you could step into the ring with the heavyweights. You thought you could sabotage my legacy. Your legacy, Billy spat. Your legacy is built on the broken lives of the people you've stepped on. You're threatening your own grandchildren, Victor. What kind of a monster does that?